firstly, I just want to say thank you very much to Mark and to all of the team here at Brickworks. This is my second visit here, and it is an institution, and it's great to be here with Carmen and with Sam as well, because we have a really important story to tell people right across Western Sydney, right across New South Wales, and indeed right across the country. I want to get prices down. I want to make sure that we can stop the wreckage of Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese in relation to their energy policy, and that has forced up the price of electricity. And there is a big difference as we go into this election. The Prime Minister is promising to increase the cost of electricity and gas, but he has broken his promise in relation to reducing power prices. And the $150 that you've got to offset your ever-increasing electricity prices, that is not going to be the case after the election. The Prime Minister can't afford to keep giving out the $150 cheques because people's power bills have gone up by $1,300. And the one thing that we know about the Labor Party is that their energy bills will continue to go up, and this train wreck of a policy that the Labor Party has on at the moment is destroying industry, destroying jobs and destroying households. On the other hand, the coalition government has a positive plan to make sure that we can manage the economy effectively. And in many parts, this election is a test of who do you trust to manage the economy so that we can deal with the cost of living pressures. We have a plan to cut the fuel tax by 25 cents a litre, and if we do that, it means people in Western Sydney, on the Central Coast, right across the country, whenever they go to the fuel station, they can cut their amount that they're paying by about $14, $15 every time they fill up their tank. Mr Albanese is promising 70 cents a day in a tax cut, which doesn't start for 15 months. And I just think this Prime Minister is out of touch with how much pain Australians are feeling. Unless we manage the economy well, we're not going to deal with these issues. People have spoken for years and years about an East Coast gas reservation. We have put the policy on the table. And it's about action now. It's about a positive plan to help Australians now with the cost of living pressures. I want to make sure that we can manage the economy well so that we can lower inflation. I want to make sure that we can help young Australians achieve the dream of home ownership again. If you look around us, Austral Bricks and Brickworks here, many of their brands, they are an integral part in the construction costs. And yet Brickworks here in New South Wales is paying about 3 times the cost of energy, so 3 times the cost of gas compared to what they're doing in their plants in the United States. Just think about that. Each month the gas bill here is in the millions of dollars. In the United States it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And of course that means that young Australians are paying much more to construct their home. BlueScope, the biggest steel manufacturer in our country, has come out and said very clearly that our gas policy will mean cheaper gas for manufacturing, for the production of steel. So it'll be a cheaper input cost into homes being built, and industry and the factories and the roads that we see that all require these ingredients and all require natural gas to be a part of that process. Natural gas is a key ingredient in the production of electricity in our country. And if we don't get the price of gas down, if it keeps going up under Mr Albanese's plan, then we will see manufacturing close, we will see the offshoring of jobs, and already the 29,000 small businesses, we've seen that they have failed on this government's watch at a record rate. And that's not something that we're going to stand by and abide. I want to make sure that we can have a safer country. I want to make sure that Australians understand that at the next election there is a big difference between a weak Prime Minister where he's not putting money into keeping Australians safe. We will have it front and centre. A government I lead will make sure that we can keep our country as safe as humanly possible and make sure that our communities and our towns are safer than the Labor Party can offer at the next election. So there's a lot riding on this next election. It really is a sliding doors moment, and I believe that we have the policies, and we'll outline the policies to the Australian public over the coming weeks, and it'll be a big decision because 3 more years of a Labor Greens government would be a disaster for families and for businesses.
Mr Dutton, you told the Australian newspaper Troy Brampton you would be open to a referendum on Indigenous constitutional recognition. I wonder if you just want to step us through what that might look like. Would it be a preamble? Would it be some sort of symbolic recognition? And I would point out as well that Indigenous Australian people who are living in Indigenous Australian areas have voted overwhelmingly for the Voice to Parliament referendum last time. In previous constitutional processes, that preamble process has been not supported by Indigenous Australians. Can you walk us through what that would look like and how you would get Indigenous Australians on board with that proposal?
Well, first point, I think as I've demonstrated in our positions that we've taken, I want practical support for Indigenous Australians, and I don't want to see the terrible situation continue in Alice Springs that the Prime Minister created when he removed the cashless debit card, and the violence and the lack of attendance rates at school is something that we should make sure as a country that we address. And unfortunately, many of the indicators have gone backwards in terms of those that we would expect to have progressed in relation to life expectancy and in relation to education, health outcomes, housing, etc. So that's the first point that I've made. The second point that I've made in relation to that issue is that there will be no referendum until there's a position of bipartisanship. And clearly there's no bipartisanship on this issue, and there will be no referendum over the course of the next term of Parliament. The Prime Minister's made that very clear. I think it's interesting to get an understanding from the Prime Minister whether or not he still supports a republic and whether there is still a national platform policy for the republic to be decided by the Australian people next election. The Prime Minister tells different audiences different things, but I think at candidate debates in Green seats or where Labor's trying to win back those seats, I think it'll be interesting to hear the Labor Party candidates explain the Prime Minister's position. Does he support a republic or not? And again, I think the Prime Minister's been, pretty weak in relation to his position. But that's it.
Can I ask you what Anthony Albanese says, and I'm using his words, that large supermarkets are taking the piss out of Australians. One, are they lying to us, as that comment suggests? And two, are heavy fines for supermarkets the way to curb price gouging?
Well, this is the sixth policy review that the Prime Minister's offered in 3 years. Prices have gone up by 30%. So I would say that the Prime Minister is as weak as water. I really would. He is as weak as water. And the supermarkets know it, and Australians know it. And I think you've got a Prime Minister who can't stand up to the supermarkets. We've said to the supermarkets, you rip off Australian consumers and you continue to believe that your market share gives you power in the market that should be exploited. I will act as Prime Minister, and this Prime Minister has demonstrated that he won't. So we've spoken about, and our policy is in relation to divestiture, it's in relation to a supermarket commissioner, it's in relation to significant fines that start at $10 million. But let's be serious here about what the Prime Minister's trying to do. He's trying to create this massive distraction from his own failings. Prices are up in supermarkets at the moment, just like they are in the building industry, just like they are in relation to small businesses and their input costs, the local coffee shop that's had their energy prices go through the roof. Prices are up at supermarkets at the moment because of Anthony Albanese. That's the predominant reason. Now, where supermarkets act against the interests of consumers, we will act as a government, I promise you. But I'll just make this point. If the power bill here is 3 times the cost of what a comparable factory is in the United States to make bricks, that's happening for farmers. It's happening for the delivery of goods to the supermarket. When you walk into a Coles or an IGA, the cold rooms that are operating, the fridges and the freezers where you retrieve your milk and ice cream and products from, that's a problem that Anthony Albanese's making. And the energy prices that Australians are paying in their own households, that's what's crippled 29,000 small businesses, and that's what's driven up the costs of everything across our community. So
you're defending the supermarkets?
Not at all. I'm the leader, the only leader in this election that has the strength to stand up to the supermarkets, and we've made that clear. But I'm not going to give the Prime Minister a free pass here, which is what he's after. He can try and blame every Australian. He can try and blame every farmer for charging more for their produce. He can try and blame BlueScope. He can try and blame Brickworks for increasing their costs. The fact is, the common ingredient here is Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese, and I think they're demonstrating it on a regular basis.
That previously said that 9 million Australians voted no against the vision in why is putting a preamble into the Constitution dividing on the race?
I've dealt with that issue.
Just in terms of the preamble versus your campaign over many months against that previous referendum.
Well, it's the sad reality is that I think the Prime Minister has screwed his opportunity as he has on many policies. Now, the Prime Minister's demonstrated weakness since day one in relation to the voice, but unprepared to explain it to the Australian people, unprepared to take tough decisions against supermarkets, unprepared as Prime Minister to stand up to the supermarkets. I think if there is bipartisan support, that it's a sign of respect, and the Prime Minister believes that there is no opportunity for there to be a bipartisan position, and therefore there'll be no referendum.
Mr. Dutton, I wanted to come to a referendum. You've also mentioned that you're supporting the 4-year term. It does have bipartisan support. You've also said that you might explore another referendum to remove the citizenship of all citizens who commit serious offences. Could you talk us through the thinking of any of those happening this term? Would they be rolled into one?
Well, firstly, I've spoken to the Prime Minister about 4-year terms, and I commented on that at the time. The Prime Minister had no interest in pursuing that, and he's made it clear that he doesn't want to support it over the next term of Parliament. So I think that is a moot point as well. In relation to other matters, I've said clearly, I want to, as I did as Minister for Immigration and Home Affairs, I want to make our country safer. I deported 6,000 criminals, and that has meant that young women who would have fallen prey to that sex offender, they're not today's victim because I kicked that sex offender, that rapist out of our country. I don't make any apology for that. I've said, though, that we want to toughen the laws, which is exactly what we will do in government. The government hasn't kicked out rapists and pedophiles at the same rate we did when we were in government, and Australia is less safe because of it. And one of the reasons that I think Australians will support a coalition government at the next election is because we have a greater capacity to keep women and children safer, and a greater ability to keep our communities safer and our country safer as well. And in relation to the laws, if it's proven that they're not sufficient in the eyes of the court, then in a break glass scenario, we can look at options that are available to us.
Mr. Dutton, you said, Mr. Dutton,
you said at the Law Institute that Kevin Rudd is persona non grata in Washington. Does that mean you would pull him back if you're elected?
No, I've been very clear. I want Kevin Rudd to succeed because I want our country to succeed. And the Prime Minister made a decision to appoint Mr. Rudd as the ambassador. Now, Mr. Albanese did that knowing all of the disparaging remarks of what Mr. Rudd had posted online, etc. He knew that Penny Wong and others, including the Prime Minister himself, had made some of these remarks. So that's an issue for the Prime Minister. But Mr. Rudd's in place, and I hope that he can succeed in advancing our nation's interests. I just say the other point that's worth making in relation to, I suppose, the Rudd Gillard era is that there was a period where Australians were excited about a Labor government, probably the same as they were when Mr. Albanese was elected, but the reality of Labor governments hit home. And I think the reality of this Labor government is hitting home for Australians. They realise that at this election, the contest really is about who can lower petrol prices. Well, we've committed to lowering it by 25 cents. Under Mr. Albanese, after the next election, you'll pay 25 cents a litre more for your diesel and unleaded than you will under a Liberal government.
Mr. Dutton,
you'll pay more for energy, both gas and electricity, under Mr. Albanese than what you will under...
Mr. Dutton, you've just made that commitment again there, and you said that on that...
We're in Western Sydney today, but over in Western Australia, you've made a pitch to voters in today's paper. What's your plan to drive down power prices in the West?
Well, to make sure that we can work with the Cook government first and foremost, and I believe that we can do that. It's to approve the North West Shelf project, which has been put off conveniently until the 31st of May. Now, why has Tanya Plibersek done that? Because she doesn't want to go to the election with the position of having taken a decision and giving the certainty to the people of WA. I think it's a complete and utter con job, and I think West Australians understand that Tanya Plibersek is more interested in votes in her own seat in inner city Sydney than she is in Western Australians.
Mr. Dutton, you
I've got high praise for Scott and the connections that he's got, but as I pointed out before, we've got an ambassador in place, and I want the ambassador to be successful. when we were in government, we were able to negotiate the AUKUS arrangement as a coalition government with a Democrat administration, and we did that respectfully. We negotiated hard, and we got a fantastic outcome for our country because the AUKUS submarines will underpin our national security for the next century. And we were able to negotiate with the Trump administration before that to make sure that Australia was spared from the tariffs. Now, Mr Albanese hasn't been able to do that because it's not just in Australia that Mr Albanese is seen as weak, but he's also seen as weak on the world stage. And I strongly believe that I will be able to drive a better deal for Australia in our negotiations with the US than a weaker Anthony Albanese.
Mr Dutton, you've committed to lower power prices under the coalition. You've committed to lower power prices under the coalition. You've also said this election is about who do you trust to lower energy prices. Can you tell Australians how much in dollar terms they will save under you? And if you can't, why should they trust that you'll keep your promise?
Well, Australians know that a coalition government always cleans up a Labor's mess. First, John Howard did it in '96. Tony Abbott did it when he came into government after the disastrous years of Rudd and Gillard, when Anthony Albanese was the Deputy Prime Minister, sitting around the table making all the stupid decisions that the Rudd-Gillard government made. I have been part of a government that has successfully managed the economy after cleaning up Labor's mess, and we'll do it again. I've got experience in small business. I've been on the front bench for the last 20 years in government and opposition, in economic and social and national security portfolios, and I've got a united team with purpose and a determination to do the right thing by our country.
And confirming no dollar figure, Mr Dutton.
And we've also made a very significant decision in relation to how do we achieve a cleaner, reliable and cheaper energy market. In the long term, that is through nuclear power underpinning renewables. It's 44% cheaper. That's the independent analysis. Now, you'll see some more analysis come out over the next couple of days, which will provide some percentage figures and some detail about what we expect the impact will be. And others will comment on that as well. But the point I'd make is that there's no disputing the fact that if you put more supply into the market, that prices will come down. And at the moment, the government is choking the supply of natural gas into the economy, which is why Victoria is talking about importing gas from overseas into our country, which will just drive up prices. So
we'll see percentage figures for how much household bills will come down?
Well, we'll provide the detail, but what we know is that...
And that's percentage figures, just to confirm?
What we'll know is that what Australians will know by the time of the next election is that our policy will deliver cheaper energy costs. We've already promised to deliver cheaper petrol and diesel by 25 cents a litre, starting when we get into government. We've already said to the Australian people that we can have long-term energy costs 44% cheaper. That's $263 billion cheaper than Labor's plan. And I don't want to see factories like this close down. I want to see them expand because they're employing Australians. And out in Western Sydney, if this factory closes, it is a disaster for the local economy because it's not just the workers directly here, but it's also the local residents who work in associated industries. And, if you look at what Carmen and Sam have had to say about cost of living pressures, it relates to exactly the conversations they're having with families as they knock on doors in their electorates. And Australians know it across the country. The price of everything has gone up under Anthony Albanese, and if he's re-elected, they'll only go up further. It's only a coalition government managing the economy successfully where we'll see prices come down, energy prices, grocery prices, price of petrol, and that's what this next election is about.
Mr. Dutton, last question, just on supermarkets. As part of your measures, would any of them mean that price gouging will be illegal, or you don't think it needs legal framework?
Well, we've already announced that there are significant fines from $10 million as a minimum fine, right? It goes beyond that in terms of the impact it will have. And if there is price gouging, it will be dealt with by government only. I promise you that. And if the laws are insufficient, if we need to change the laws, we will change them because we've got duopoly influence in the market in some places. We've got a situation where IGA or an Aldi store is being locked out of a particular market. Unacceptable. But the biggest impact at the moment on food prices, grocery prices up by 30%, it's Anthony Albanese. So we'll take on the supermarkets, but the Australian people need to take on Anthony Albanese if we want to get food prices and grocery prices down. And we can do that.
Mr. Dutton,
Just very quickly.
You mentioned the world stage.
Well, I saw the Prime Minister out this morning catching up with an elderly Australian. I hope he told that lady that, yes, she's struggling obviously with the cost of living crisis under Labor, but the government's planning to spend tens of billions of taxpayers' dollars on hosting a COP process that's not going to bring down power prices and is going to sign a Labor government up to giving tens or hundreds of billions of dollars out to third-party countries. I mean, it's just it's madness. So that's not something we're supporting. So at the next election, there's a big choice to make, and I believe Australians to support a coalition government because I want to get the cost of living down, and we can do that after the next election once we get rid of this bad government. Thank you very much.
Can we ask a candidate a question, Mr. Dutton? We haven't